Hi folks, Zack Ogles here with Crop Vitality. Today I'm out here at Southern Grown Turf, and turf grass is a different crop. Something in agriculture we really don't think about that much because we're always focused on cotton, soybeans, corn. These big acreage crops, wheat, vegetable crop, all your fruit trees and nuts. But turf grass, it's an important crop for us, and I call it a crop because really it is. And in the case of sod production, this is the crop right here, and this is the finished product, and this is a piece of zoysia, El Toro zoysia grass sod, and as you can see, this has really excellent tensile strength. This grass is really dense. It holds together great. Anytime when you can grab sod and you can hold it like this, that is a really superior product. And part of that, this all goes back to the way that you manage the crop. You have to have your nutrients balanced. You have to give the proper amount of water. All those things, keep weeds out. All those are really important aspects to producing a high quality sod like this one. One of the things that we found here at Southern Grown Turf was that sulfur deficiency was an issue, which is becoming more and more common in agriculture. Part of that is due to a lack of sulfur being deposited through the atmosphere. In the early 90s, the Clean Air Act, it restricted the amount of sulfur compounds that can be released in the atmosphere. So as a result of that, the air become cleaner. However, because of that, less sulfur is being deposited from the atmosphere. So here, a lot of areas have just really never had to put a lot of thought into sulfur fertility. But once we have that adjusted here, it has really made a good impact on the turf quality and the production cycle. And today I'm out here with Ben Bottrell, one of the owners of Southern Grown Turf in Roanoke, Alabama. And the farm here is made up of about a little under 200 acres of turf grass. And they grow 3 different types. They grow 419 Bermuda, they grow El Toro zoysia, and they also grow Emerald zoysia. So one of the things that we have done here is we don't have a tremendous amount of research on turf grass, particularly in sod production. So that was one of the things I wanted to do, was to try to work with a seasoned grower to put in some of these trials and to see where we can how we can work in the turf production. So one of the things that Ben had an issue with here that really worked in our favor was he had a little bit of a sulfur deficiency. So he started noticing some yellowing, and really the crop just wasn't doing quite as good as it should be. So Ben, you got some ideas about what were you seeing? And
well, it started with kind of some splotches of yellow. We noticed it got bigger and broader, and hadn't really seen a lot of that before. We hadn't really been big in fertigation. We've been more granular fertilizer. Zack came in and really changed things around. We went straight through to fertigation totally. Really instantly saw a huge difference once we started getting the sulfur out.
Yeah, and because one of the things, people don't really think that much about sulfur deficiency, because particularly in the southeast, it seems like only in the recent years people have started putting more emphasis on sulfur nutrition. So particularly in a sod production, it's always nitrogen, but that nitrogen is not effectively used by the plant without sulfur. So when you don't have sulfur, you really see a deficiency, and usually that comes across in yellowing. And when you start seeing the turf not respond to big doses of nitrogen, that's a good sign that you have sulfur deficiency.
That was exactly what was going on.
Because again, and if you ever could do a tissue analysis, which we did, you'll see the nitrate levels are usually really high in sulfur deficient turf, and that's because the plant just really can't use the nitrogen effectively, so it just stores it up as nitrates. So one of the things that we, after looking at this and talking with Ben, we looked and decided, hey, I think there's some blends that we could probably work with that may do work really well for you. And as Ben mentioned, we have he has the ability to fertigate everything. So we have, everything is hooked up to a central pump station, which is back over here, and they have a 1,000-gallon nurse tank where they can actually inject fertilizer. So what we came up with was a blend that it's a blend of UAN 32, thiazole to get the sulfur that they needed, and also Ensure, which is our trizone nitrogen product that helps give a little bit of slow release nitrogen in there to kind of give a good steady growth in between fertigation cycles. So we thought it would work, and what we wanted to do was obviously we wanted to try it on a small scale first. So Ben let us put a replicated trial in on one of the plots up here, and we started that back in as soon as it started to warm up. And we really this year had a really slow transition from spring into summer, so we had some cooler temperatures, so it wasn't absolutely ideal. But what we found was in that replicated trial, when we compared this thiazole, UAN, and Ensure blend to the grower standard, which is just straight UAN or granular or urea, what we found was statistical significantly better color and quality in the sulfur containing treatments, as well as increased root mass in those treatments. So we saw that on a trial, but what really matters is what the grower sees, and I think that it kind of speaks for itself, because as Ben told me before we went on camera here, that this is all grow back from just this year. So Ben, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here in the background and
yeah, sure.
what this has done.
This field that you can see where he's mowing now, obviously a lot of dust, there's some bare areas. This was completely harvested out in January, and I'm not sure how good you can see it here, but it is totally different than what it was last year as far as grow back. It would have been August before it would have looked this good, and it's really impressed me. And really, to add to what he's the brains behind this, I can tell you from the backwoods side, cost, efficiency, and it's simple. It's a very simple process running this fertigation versus trying to find those times in between showers and what have you to get the granular out. This has been it's been a real smooth transition going from granular to using the fertigation. We've got 5 towers. It saves time, it saves money. Obviously, it speaks for itself on the ground. It's a win-win for me, for sure. And
too, something, when you do use the fertigation, it improves nitrogen use efficiency. You're putting it out in smaller increments as you water. It also allows, you mentioned the cost of it, that this is lower cost than it was last year, because one that previously used a lot of ammonium nitrate, which is it's an excellent fertilizer, does really good, but in his case it was a little bit more expensive than nitrogen from UAN. And one of the drawbacks of using urea nitrogen sources, particularly as a granular, is that you're prone to lose a percentage of that through volatilization just when you apply it, if you don't water that in. But the way we've got this set up is that when you're using that through a fertigation system, volatilization losses are virtually non-existent, because you're watering it in with the irrigation. So when we think about turf grass, it's different from all your other traditional crops, because normally we're looking at bushels per acre or pounds of lint per acre. But in turf grass, we're looking for, again, good strong tensile strength. We're looking for, a grass that holds together good. Also, we're looking, a good dense canopy, keep your weed pressure down. And we're also looking for a good color, which, very rarely is that something that's of a concern in some of your agronomic crops. But here, the aesthetic part of this is really important. And that's where, proper nutrient management is really critical. Behind me here, we have an example of the fertigation actually running on this field. The turf here is 419 Bermuda grass, and in fact, right out here is where we had our randomized trial, where we collected data, and we're going to have that. I'm finishing up the statistics now on that, and I will have that available here shortly. But behind us, you can see as we got the pivots going out here, you know, that's one of the big things with fertigation. You know, we're not, you know, he's able to not only, you know, water the turf as he needs to, but at the same time, you're able to inject that that nitrogen, the slow release nitrogen, and also that thiosulfate sulfur all in one pass here. All right? So Ben, after having used this program for, you know, the beginning part of this season, what advice would you give to another grower in a similar situation?
I'd call this guy. Well, no, really, sulfur would be my number one thing to throw out especially in the sod farm, and it's always been a caution of mine to not put too much sulfur. It's always been a thing that I've been taught anyway, that, you know, sulfur drops your pH down too low, and it's exactly what the issue was here, was lacking the sulfur, and Zach had proven that very quickly by adding more sulfur. And you probably could elaborate better than me on putting the line back to keep the pH from dropping too low, but it's...
Right, and I'm glad Ben brought that up, because you know, it is a common misconception when people, they think that sulfate is driving down the soil pH, because ammonium sulfate does lower soil pH, but the fact is the lowering of the pH comes from the nitrification of the ammonium. The nitrogen is what lowers the pH. It has nothing to do with the sulfate. You know, the sulfate is already as oxidized as it can be, and so it really has no effect on soil pH. Now, the thiosulfate sulfur, which is the form that you're using in this program, it does have a lowering effect on the soil pH. However, the difference in thiosulfate sulfur versus, say, sulfate sulfur is that, you know, thiosulfate, it can help with nitrogen use efficiency, it can help with micronutrient availability, it can even help with water penetration in your soil. So it has a lot of good characteristics that sulfate sulfur really doesn't have. And while it is true that it lowers the pH slightly, the majority of that lowering of the pH comes from the ammonium that's attached to the thiosulfate for thiosol. So it is a concern, and that's something that I'm glad you brought up, because a lot of people have a misunderstanding about that. But what we know for a fact, if you don't have sulfur, if you don't have sulfate sulfur in your soil ready to go, then you're going to have a deficiency, and you're not going to get the maximum yield that you can get.
Absolutely. That's a proven fact here, and it speaks for itself. I've been super impressed. Super impressed. I think there's a lot of people out there that can benefit. No question. We've benefited here. But like I said, cost. That's
yeah. Hey,
that's where my standpoint is, and it has definitely been there and simplified things. I mean, it's, you know, from me to the guys doing it, it's really simplified things. So I can't say enough. It's a win-win all the way around for sure.
It's awfully easy to go over to that pump
Absolutely.
and turn that pump on and walk away and let your fertilizer be applied.
If it's too wet out here, you can't get the tractors out, you can't get the fertilizer, the spreaders out. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
This is
convenience,
really made things
cost,
easier.
efficacy, you know, and yield. I mean, all of those are the things that matter.
Absolutely.
Whether you're growing turf grass or whether you're growing soybeans or corn, those are the things to remember. And with our products at Crop Vitality and the fertilizer, Thiosol,